Ertharin Cousin, a friend of GZERO. The last time we talked to you, actually, you told us it was early after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And you said, we're going to quickly go from an availability problem with food to an affordability problem with food. Has that happened, and where are we at right now on that spectrum?
It's happened. And first of all, we have the world to thank. And I want to thank GZERO for giving me a platform to talk about those issues last year. Because we have the world to thank that we didn't enter into a food crisis. In fact, WFP last year raised $14 billion so that those who were most acutely affected by food insecurity, they were able to access food through the WFP and other organizations. But what we also saw was rising prices in food, not just in the developing world, but across the entire globe. What we see now is 3.1 billion people who can't afford a diverse, nutritious diet. It's out of reach because of the increased food inflation, which has not, unlike gas prices, which have gone down, food prices have not.
So when you talk about diverse, nutritious food, let's divide that into there's so-called food deserts, even in the United States,
Sure.
in urban areas, right?
Sure.
And then there are developing countries,
Yes.
right, where a
Yes.
different kind of availability issue
Sure.
exists. So how do you sort of square those two different realities?
This is a question much like the ones I received when I was executive director of the World Food Program. People would often ask me, where's the most urgent need? And I would say you should never put one hungry person over another. We should never try and balance one undernourished person over another. And recognize that while circumstances are different, the effect on the person's health is the same. So while the numbers in the United States, for example, we have 35 million people who can't afford access to a nutritious meal. In Canada, you have about 4.5 million people who can't afford access to a nutritious diet on a regular basis. Okay, so then let's talk about places like Sub-Saharan Africa, where and the entire globe, where 843 million people. We saw an increase between 2020 and today of 200 million people who are now food insecure. And primarily food insecure because of food affordability challenges, not food availability challenges. Of course, those food availability problems exist in places where there's ongoing conflicts, where, for example, in Malawi, where you've had the challenges with weather that has affected access to food. Yes, those places exist around the globe. But food affordability today and the food insecurity today is affecting 843 million people around the globe. And that we do need to underline, that we do need to recognize is going in the wrong direction. We have seen an increase every year since the global community came together in 2015 to say that we were going to eliminate hunger by 2030. Since that year, every year we've seen an increase in the number of people who are food insecure.
Now, when you talk about it being an affordability problem, 52% of people that GZERO surveyed across our social media channels said that they're concerned about rising food prices. If availability isn't the problem, and maybe inflation is, who do you blame for that?
Blame is an interesting word. What are the causes? I think the causes are directly related to the fact that food inputs are more expensive. The commodities are more expensive. And as a result, processed food is more expensive. As a result, meat protein is more expensive. And so I don't blame anyone. The last person I'm ever going to blame is a farmer, because they grow what they get paid to grow. And unfortunately, the prices that are continuing to rise on what they get paid to grow.
What about big corporations, though, who have some control over what they do with their food prices?
Some would argue that big corporations do have a responsibility here, that many big corporations are price taking. But the reality is, for all of them, for every corporation that is in the food production business, there have been increased costs of labor, increased cost of food, increased cost of production, as well as increased cost of inputs. And when you add those numbers up, that results in a product that gets a product price increase that gets passed along to the consumer.
Last question, because we are at the U.S. Canada summit. In what ways could these two nations work closer and better together on this very issue of food insecurity?
I get really excited about Canada and the U.S. working closer together on agriculture and food system production. And we need to remember that agriculture is also about feed and fuel as well as food. And all of those have an impact then on the price of food. And there's a significant interchange between those commodity lines in the United States and Canada. And so our ability to work together on reducing the cost and the production of agricultural products for feed and agricultural products for fuel that could provide more land and availability of land for production of more food for consumption, and particularly more diverse foods like produce, could result in more availability of affordable, diverse diets, reductions in the amount of food insecurity, not just here in Canada and the U.S., but particularly across the developing world. And so our working together on our agriculture system, as well as on the research that is necessary to produce more efficiently those feed, fuel, and food crops, will result in a food system that can meet all of our needs at a lower rate, and as a result, making food more available for all.
Ertharin Cousin, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.